Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special session with a Q&A with the two producers of our film for this week's Virtual Island Summit, The Salt in Our Waters. I'm delighted to have with us here, joining from Bangladesh, Rezwan Sharira Shumit, one of the producers, and his colleague Ilan Girard joining from France, I believe. Is that right, Ilan? Yes, okay, great. So the film is now available, and if you check out the agenda, you'll be able to watch it. I know no one's able to watch it yet, but it will be available very shortly. And we were delighted to have this film as part of this event because, to be honest, Bangladesh is not a country that we've featured in these forums very much before, despite being a country very much impacted by climate change, and with a large number of islands, many of them densely populated. Often in our island innovation community, when we're thinking about islands, we're talking about the Caribbean and the Pacific, occasionally Scotland, or even Maine and the east coast of Canada, and South Asia doesn't feature prominently enough. So if you have not yet watched the film, the link is available in the chat. Would very much encourage you to go there after this session to watch that. And now I'd like to introduce the two producers. Maybe Sumit, we'll go to you first. Tell us just a little bit about yourself and maybe the film overall. Well, yourself first. Who are you, and how did you get involved with this?
Thank you so much, James. It's a great pleasure to be presenting our film at the Virtual Island Innovation. I am first and foremost a writer and director from Bangladesh. I grew up here, spent most of my time here in Bangladesh. I spent 5 years in New York. I did film school there. I went to the NYU graduate film program, but then returned to my country to make this film. So this is my first feature-length film. And previously, I've made some short films, but this is sort of the film that gave me the big breakthrough in the international circuit. We got a lot of support from various communities and international agencies and bodies. We'll talk about those shortly. But in short, the type of stories that attract me are, I sort of like social dilemmas portrayed in very designed worlds. So those are some type of the things. So my films are usually a social commentary, and I hope that you guys get to enjoy it in the next 24 hours. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. And this summit, I mean, we are talking about environmental sustainability, of course, but the general theme of the event is sustainability on islands. I always say that sustainability is also about culture and society too. So this morning we had a discussion about language preservation in the Scottish Islands of the Gaelic language. We've had discussions on the impacts of migration and all these other social and cultural impacts. And I think, as well as being a very important commentary on climate change, your film also has a lot of discussions about Bangladeshi society, religion, culture, and how all of this plays into that theme. So it's something I'd love to dig into a little bit. Ilan, over to you. Please tell us a bit about yourself and your involvement with the film.
Yes, thank you very much for having us at your forum. I am based in Paris, as you said. I am a producer. I'm also a finance consultant for the film industry and also helping film funds to get together. I've been involved in several films before I discovered this project. I'm one of the producers of March of the Penguin. I also did a film called Plastic Planet about the danger of plastic, in our society. And I think that Shumit's proposal, when we met, interested me because Bangladesh is a country that is not so well known. I worked in India before, and I found that there were some kind of very genuine ways of putting, the challenge of modernization, of westernization of society. And I mean, as we're producing this film, the climate change issues, become bigger and bigger. And somehow the story of our film is also the story of what happened in the Delta, in the southern Bangladesh, and how, the sea rising is challenging millions of people there. So I think it's an important film in that respect. And in my filmography, it's really a film that stands out. And I'm really proud, that we're presenting this film in your forum.
Thank you so much. And I'm just looking at the chat to see where people are joining us from. And it's great to see the Philippines, a number of Bangladeshis, the Greek islands, Jamaica, Trinidad, Sumatra, Pompeii, Micronesia. I missed a few, I'm sure. St. Martin. Let me know if there's any others that I missed there in the chat. So we have islands around the world. And I also know there are people watching on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, where we're also streaming this session as well. And what links Bangladesh as a country with many of these islands? Right now, Bangladesh, I believe, is the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which is a UN group of countries that includes many of the small island developing states that share many of these vulnerabilities to climate change. And so in the lead up to the COP26 climate conference in November, these climate vulnerable countries are really calling on action and calling on action from the big polluting economies. And this film, at first, I mean, one of the big messages of this film is clearly the vulnerability of these island societies in Bangladesh that are clearly very vulnerable. And Shumit, maybe you can tell us a bit about how climate change is viewed in Bangladesh and kind of the level of understanding in some of these very rural communities and how you were able to portray that in the film.
First, I'd like to thank everyone who's joining from the island nations and island communities. It's so amazing. One of the reasons why this partnership, was forged in the first place with Island Innovation, because we really wanted to connect with audiences in islands across the world. We did not have that kind of network or reach. So a big thank you to Island Innovation for giving us this opportunity. It's really amazing that people are saying hi from all these distant places. So thank you so much, everyone. And coming back to your question, so in Bangladesh, we have a very long coast, right? And as you say in your intro, that the coastal belt is very densely populated, and temperature rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius or even 2 degrees Celsius will put about 30% of our population under water, and they will have to be, find new homes further up north. So the danger is very real. And for the past couple of decades, the people of the coastal communities, they are feeling it. They're seeing with their own eyes that places where they had built their establishments, their houses, their working stations are all underwater now. So they have had to constantly move further up north. The rate of the erosion and the rise of water level has risen, it has increased. The village where we shot the film is not where it used to be. So it was a tiny cluster of 20 to 25 families. We shot it 2.5 years ago. That's when we wrapped production. And now recently when I went back, I found out that the entire village had to relocate. And I have been following these people for the past 6 years. and they're my friends, and I've forged a very deep relationship with them. They call me all the time. There was a gap because of the pandemic. I wasn't able to go and visit them for 1.5 years. But when I went back, it was really shocking, and it sort of hit home for me. I was just standing there and seeing the place where we shot the film is now underwater. So the danger is real. These people are facing it. However, they do not know why this is happening. Not necessarily all of them know this. They don't have the big picture. That's why sometimes, so there is a void of information, and that's why sometimes they depend on superstitions or religious or on religion to explain. But I feel like as filmmakers, we can inform them why this is happening. So that's why I really want to bring this film back to these communities as well, and to show them this film and also educate them on the big picture of climate change. So that's one of my key goals. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more, Sumit, about the set? I mean, the place that this was filmed, because obviously this is not a documentary. It's but there is a real place behind that you use as the set. So you mentioned that you have this relationship with the islanders. How did that start? As someone coming from the mainland to build that relationship, how did you do that and build that level of trust and how did they respond to the film?
Yes, so we have to go all the way back to early 2008. I went there first as a young undergrad student, not to visit these fishing communities. I went there as a tourist with 7 to 8 of my friends, and we were doing touristy stuff. In the beginning, we were stuck in a bubble, but I had this knack for photography, so I left the tourist spots and started walking along the shorelines. And then I started discovering these tiny clusters of fishing families who live not very far away from the tourist bubble, but hardly anyone pays attention to them. So I started photographing them, and this was 3 months after a very devastating cyclone, and they had already started rebuilding. I had read about the cyclone from on the newspapers and saw horrific images on the TVs, but this is not just me. Most of the people in the city, to them, it's still data or horrific images that are coming from those regions during cyclone, and people read those. Back then there was no social media. They would probably just talk about those on a dining table and then forget about it. But when I was there, I saw the destruction left behind by the cyclone firsthand, but I also saw people who are turning the table around and they're rebuilding and they're going back to the ocean. So there was two sides of that story. So that left a mark on me. I kept those photographs with me for years and years. And then when I was in film school, my professors told us, all the students, that probably you should write, your first feature should be set in your own community or in your own culture. Don't try to set it in New York. That's a great advice. And I immediately, my mind transported me back to that fishing village because it's a very cinematic location. And at the same time, the characters, they're larger than life. They're so colorful. And I saw them in their fullest shade and color when I went there. And then I wrote a first draft, and then I started going back. And I saw that what I had written was my perception of them, but then I involved them in the screenwriting process. And that's when it really started to come alive, the script. So it was a very collaborative process. And without their support, I couldn't have made the film. So I'm very grateful to the fishing families and the fishermen and sisters. They all helped me and they embraced this project wholeheartedly.
Fantastic. That's really amazing. I love that. Just a reminder to everyone watching, we'd welcome your questions for the producers. So if you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A tab on Zoom, not in the chat, and I'll come to those in a little while. Ilan, I mean, similar questions for you, really. I'd love your perspectives on that and how you found filming in Bangladesh and kind of the relationship with the island community. What was that experience like for you?
I have to say that, I mean, Shumit wanted the real thing. So we went shooting on location, went shooting during monsoon, and we went shooting with real fishermen. So we have some of the best actors from Bangladesh, but we have also some non-professional actors. And that's a very, different experience from other film sets. We had to build a lot too. It's interesting, it's a community. We are in Bangladesh, so it's a Muslim country. It's a community which is, strongly, religious. And the film is also about that. It's about, the religious belief of that community and how, those changes, are kind of apprehended by them. But it's also the story of a cultural clash from a city guy coming to that little village. And I think today it's really important to tell that kind of stories because we don't really understand the disruption that is created by the modern life and technology on one hand, but also by climate change on those communities. And so it was a very special shoot, compared to other experience, because we were really, dealing with the real people, and even our actors were coming from the city had also to adjust a little bit to the ways of that community. So the story we're telling about a young artist, coming to find inspiration in that community is maybe not so far, of our own experience, even if Shumit knew the community, but then suddenly he was becoming involved with them at a very different level. And I think that's also, very precious experience. And this is why we own those people so much. And we'd like to, share their stories.
Thank you for that, Ilan. On that point about religion, because religion is a very important theme through the film, and that's something that also comes up often in our conversations in other islands around the world, is the way that religion can impact the thought on climate change and the relationship with climate change. Is there anything you'd like to comment about that, Shumit? I mean, why you chose to make religion such an important theme in the film, and also how the kind of more conservative rural religious society perceives climate change?
Yeah, so one of the key characters in the film is the chairman. The chairman is both the political and the religious leader of that tiny community, and he has been protecting this community, sort of the very protective, possessive guardian of that community. And whenever there is a problem inside, someone has a quarrel, someone has lost something, they all go to him. He fixes all their problems. And he himself used to be a fisherman when he was young, and he has faced all the hardships. He has fished in the deep seas and climbed sort of the ranks, and now he's the chairman. And he sees the importance of these old traditions that have kept the community glued together. He feels like these are needed to protect the community, so that protect the integrity of the community. And he also knows very well that there is a power far more larger than him or the community itself. So that's why he is willing to sacrifice all for that power in front of Allah. And that is when the artist comes in with his modernist beliefs, and he tells people that you are also individuals, and as individuals you also need to shine. And he starts imparting sculpting lessons to young kids. I mean, the kids, they themselves are fascinated by him, and they come willingly to his studio. And Tuni, the fisherman girl, she sees that she's stuck in a whale, and there is a far more bigger world out there. And if she is stuck in this whale, she will never be able to flourish in her full potential. So that's why she wants to leave the island. But at the same time, even though I show a clash of cultures, the artist and the chairman, they come head to head. But I hope this is apparent that I do not take any sides. I want to give both sides a fair hearing, and I try to show that the possessive guardian, the chairman, he's not only black, but he also has his white side. Like he has been protecting this community from harm from outside, and at the same time, the artist also has its vested interest. Like he wants to make an art that will probably take him to an international exhibition, make him famous. But what will happen to this community? What will happen to Tuni when everyone finds out that the sculpture he's making is about Tuni? So both sides are black and white. They are sort of in a gray zone. And I wanted to give everyone a fair hearing, and religion and technology, both I hope that have been critically analyzed, but in the end, both have to sort of work together, holding hands, to solve this big issue of climate change.
Well, I thought that was very interesting how you made those characters complex, and exactly as you said. I mean, there were sides of both characters which were unappealing, but there wasn't necessarily a hero at the end of the movie that came out as the one who solved every problem. Sorry, Ilan, you had a comment there.
Yeah, I think that what Shumit had just said is really important, and only him could do a film which is so balanced and respectful of the local communities. Because I think, you know, we very often we have a lot of bias, preconception about what society should be, and here we see that yes, those communities may not have women empowerment, etc., but they have a certain integrity, and this young man from the city tried to bring, you know, the benefit of modern life to this community. Is maybe not completely aware of disruption that is bringing in this world, and that's also very interesting, because in many countries you have this kind of hiatus between the city culture and the rural culture, and probably when you live in an island, the hiatus is even bigger. And we see also that around the thematic of climate change, those kind of conflict, or if not conflict, maybe you know, misunderstanding are exacerbated, and sometimes can bring to some radicalization in some places, because people need answers, and sometimes the easiest answers, you know, is to say that this is because of your modern ways. So I think it's an interesting tale about what happened in many countries where there's a, you know, movement for progress, but at the same time, this progress should be sufficiently respectful of the values of the communities and taking into consideration the different generations who live there.
Definitely. I was just reading a comment that was coming from Dr. Claire Nelson from the Institute of Caribbean Studies. And I know that Claire's Jamaican, and as a side comment, Jamaica has the highest density of churches in the world, I'm told, of any country. But Claire says that she's very excited to hear about this religious theme and the importance of bringing the faith community in these conversations around climate change and being able to make that. So she's made a call for a similar type of participatory movie in the Caribbean. So I'll let you share your contact details, Claire, and see if there's anyone interested in making that connection. Because I think when you watch the movie, although we're talking about a different religion and a different culture, that will very much resonate with that Jamaican or Caribbean context, or in the Pacific as well, where there is a similar relationship. We'll move away from that theme slightly. There's a couple of questions coming in, and maybe we can address this directly. Nikki has asked, is this a documentary or are there actors, and what was the reason for this choice? And I'll let you perhaps explain that, Shavit, because it's on the line. I mean, it's not a documentary, but it's a truthful story, right? It's pretty much factual. So where is the line there, and why did you make those choices? You already mentioned that a lot of the actors are from the local community as well.
Yeah, it is very much a drama, a narrative drama. I am currently actually making a short documentary on this topic, sort of a follow-up documentary on how each of these characters are doing now. But when we actually shot it 2.5, 3 years ago, we shot a drama because we wanted to talk about this topic, but also wanted to reach a very wide audience, wanted to have a theatrical premiere, and wanted to be in more outlets, and felt like a narrative fiction film will enable us to go to more venues and platforms like that. And also that the fact that an artist comes from the city, I guess, is a very important part of the film, right? That is when things starts to happen in the village. Definitely the village itself is worth making a documentary about, but I wanted to push a little further. And the film, in a way, is a microcosm of Bangladesh in unity and in division. I feel like this clash of cultures theme is very, very topical in Bangladesh, has been for a while. There is, of course, education is now rising in a very fast pace. The people are getting educated. Women empowerment is also, we are very, in a very commendable space. I feel like it's moving in the right direction. We have very many prominent women leaders, including our Prime Minister is a female. So a lot of development is happening, but at the same time, there are also very conservative enclaves or pockets in Bangladesh where all of a sudden you might get into trouble for making figurative sculptures. And I feel like no one will hurt the sculptor or the artist for no reason. Like there has to be some sort of catalyst that, pushes the balance of the edge. And in this case, in the film, the fish that they depend on disappears or does not arrive in the right time. And it sort of coincides with the artist's arrival. And that's why people start blaming the artist. So there is drama for sure in this film. It's not a documentary. And I saw that someone asked whether the fishing families and the fishermen were part of the film school process. They actually were not. So I wrote the first draft while I was in film school. But then, as I said, that I came back home in Bangladesh and then started rewriting with their help, with their involvement. And it's not that I only researched one place. I went to multiple we call them chores, and not necessarily they are always islands. They are connected with the mainland, but during high tide they get disconnected. So so we went to chores, we went to islands and various coastal villages, and we picked up bits and pieces of information, anecdotes, oral myths, and put all those together and build the script. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. I can see there's a few other comments and questions coming in, so keep those coming. I think we've answered a lot of these. There's a comment here saying, could you kindly offer some comments or guidance for islanders interested in getting involved in making similar movies, people who want to share their own environments? I think this question is from Nat. I think she's in the Pacific Islands. Ilan, maybe you can take that one.
Yeah, maybe I can answer that. Actually, I did another summit documentary about the island of Bougainville of Papua New Guinea. It's usually, I mean, I think, you know, when you have the ability to give a narrative, to build a narrative, it's whether a documentary or fiction. A documentary is definitely easier to tell because you don't have to, the process is different and the material is in front of your eyes. It's about, you know, I think people are really interested in stories from truthful communities. If I can say a word about that other film, we're telling the story of the conflict which took place in Bougainville during about 10 days when the local population were fighting Rio Tinto and a huge mine called Penguna. And our film has been seen, you know, everywhere. And it helped, you know, the population of Bougainville to call for their independence last year. So I think film are a quite powerful mean to voice, you know, the concern of islanders. In some places, you know, like, you know, the French Caribbean, for example, there are some commissions, there are institutions which are very often as program, you know, for islanders, and within the EU, there have been some specific support, you know, for those film commissions when something is shot on the island. So there are ways, but it always starts with a very strong narrative, a strong story, and also I would say adjust your expectation. The film can cost, you know, a few, you know, thousand, 50,000, you know, euro, US dollar. It doesn't need to be, you know, $1 million project. Sometimes it has to be, but in most cases not. And it can be really a testimony, especially as today life in the island, you know, is changing because means of communication and also the internet, you know, mentality are changing. So I think it would be a really great thing, you know, if people are, you know, are able to document the life there, the stories there, and maybe also the conflict they have with, you know, what comes to them and how they deal with it. So there are ways, definitely. There might not be producer there, but then when you have a good story, you can reach out to producers.
Yeah, I just want to add that making the feature film itself was incredibly challenging, and I had to train myself, and it was a step-by-step process. Lots of stars had to align before I could actually go and shoot, in terms of financing, in terms of logistics in Bangladesh, and cast and crew coming together. It was a lot of work, and lots of people said no, and I used to wait for that one yes, and and then things would start to happen. But documentaries, I feel like, are a very different beast. With mobile technology so readily available now, I feel like, and also very low range documentary cameras, but they also have 4K abilities. So with you don't need to have a big budget, but with moderate budgets, you can start shooting. So the documentary, the short follow-up documentary I told you about earlier, it was an incredibly liberating process because I didn't have to wait for big producers, big, you know, big stuff to happen. I heard from my friends over there that things were happening, stuff was moving, and I just went there and shot it. So I feel like, as Ilan said, that with planning and also fixing the scope of your project, like this is the scope of our final product, let's go one step at a time. Maybe we shoot a 5-minute spec and then show it to people who will give us the money we need to shoot the feature. And in my case, I launched the project at the co-production market in Goa, in Film Bazaar, in India. That is where I met Ilan. That was back in 2016. So they have film markets, co-production markets, where they allow filmmakers to pitch their projects. And Salt in Our Waters was one of the 18 projects that got invited there. And I made a 5-minute video. I went to the island with my handycam, made a 5-minute video of the people and also me speaking. And then when they showed it in the platform in front of 300 people, all of a sudden there was a lot of interest. And the people started to meet me and learn more about my story and my plans. And Ilan was one of them, and he was very serious about it, and we forged a partnership. And it took us, I believe, 8 months. So it also doesn't happen overnight, that partnership. So it's a process, and you have to be patient and very committed and have a never give up attitude, and you'll see the results.
I do think there's something important here about helping islanders themselves be able to portray their communities. And the reason I say that is so often islands are portrayed as either heaven or hell. They are the Caribbean tropical destination where you go on holiday and everything is perfect, or they are the Lord of the Flies, desert islands, death, and it's one or the other. And I think it's such a shame because often that doesn't portray the realities of life for people. It doesn't portray the nuance and often can be quite exclusionary to people. And so I would love to be able to see more from all of the islands that we see in the Caribbean, the Pacific, Indian Ocean and beyond, more kind of indigenous or locally generated films that can really tell the truth of that story and give that nuance. Especially when it comes to climate change, reporting from the outside really lacks that depth and all of these cultural elements that come in. It's dismissed as kind of disappearing islands, and that's the end of the story. And there needs to be more depth there. So we're almost out of time. So I can see there's been some great discussion here. Really appreciate everyone who's joined us on a Saturday, and I know a lot of people will go out and purchase the film. Just a reminder, there is a very small charge to view the film, just to cover costs. The link is there in the chat now, and it will be available for about 24 hours to watch. So do make sure that you are able to join, watch that, and be able to see the film during these 24 hours. Hopefully it will be more available online in the future, but I know it's a relatively new film. You're still going to festivals. You've been very successful at a number of festivals and awards, and there's much more to come. We'll just give kind of our producers the last word each. Anything else that you want to comment that you haven't said so far? So maybe Ilan, we can go to you first, and then to Shumit for the last words.
I want just to say to creative people that there's definitely a big interest for Ireland. And if you want to have a story that resonates, think very locally, but try to tell a universal story. I think that the recipe for successful film, and also, you know, to for yourself, you know, to try to protect, you know, your culture.
Yeah, great words, Ilan. And to that, I want to add that sometimes it also helps to watch what other island communities are doing, and try to find other like-minded voices who have sort of the similar background as you have, so that you can join forces, and all of a sudden you're not the only person doing the heavy lifting anymore. You have partners. For example, in my case, I'm very indebted to my cinematographer. Her name is Chananun Chotungroj. She is from Thailand, and a big portion of her childhood she spent in the southern parts of Thailand, where in a coastal village with her grandmother. And the moment she read an early version of the script, she could immediately connect with the story, and she got on board. And she added so much to the storytelling. Like, she saw Bangladesh through a unique lens. And you say that usually these communities or these places are showed as either heaven or hell, and we really wanted to avoid that route. We wanted to have the colors, of course, but grounded in reality. So, and the cinematographer played a huge role. And I found her out, and also I found my production designer, who is French. His name is Sylvain Amias. He also had prior South Asian experience, but at the same time, he was ready to, you know, get in the mud, get dirty, and build these sets. He involved the local islanders to build the houses. And that was also fascinating to watch. I couldn't have done all of this myself. So I'm very grateful to my producer, Ilan, my production designer, DP, editors, and everyone, the colorists, the sound designers, everyone. So try to find other like-minded people, and so that you have partners, and also try to watch what others are doing. For example, you can, of course, watch The Salt in Our Waters, but also try to find other island stories. I want to make a recommendation, if I may. So there is a film I watched recently called The Land Has Eyes by a director named Vili Herenico. The Land Has Eyes. And this is the first film shot in the island of Rotuma. First feature film shot in Rotuma, and it's amazing. It premiered in Sundance. And I was blown away by it. So, and there are other island films like this. So try to see what they did, how they did it, what they got right, and what they didn't, and maybe you can go further. Like, probably I had a lot of limitations, of course, not only resources, but also time and also my own capacity. I'm a first-time filmmaker. So hopefully, as I undertake more projects, I will, you know, sort of continue pushing. And you never know, I might return to this community again to make another feature. I definitely would love to, if an opportunity arises.
Fantastic. And it's great, actually. I hadn't heard of that film, but earlier this week, we did interview a producer who made another film about Rotuma. She grew up in New Zealand with a Rotuman father, and it was about her journey home to visit the place that her father was from, and that relationship that she had with Rotuma. And I can see Stacey here in the chat interviewed her, so I definitely think there'll be a number of people looking up this other film from Fiji, from Rotuma also. Ilan, Sumit, really, really appreciate your time. That was fantastic insight into the film and the thought process behind it and all of the nuances of that film. We've already had a couple of people reach out and to go ahead and say that they're very excited about watching this. And we're really happy to have been able to partner with you to bring this film to Islanders, because I think the story will resonate with a lot of people, and it's really good for this island connection to be made across such a diverse group of places around the world that we'll see a similarity there. So thank you both so much. Really appreciate you joining us on the weekend, and look forward to watching the film again. Thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye,
great rest of
everyone.